Okay. Let me give you some general comments about COVID-19 vaccination, kind of to set some of the stage. And as our county manager said, there are going to be a lot of things we don't know. So I'm going to try to provide what we definitely know and what we at least believe the directions are, with the caveat that things can change and we're going to have to be flexible because the nation's never done this before, let alone Arlington. So many people are anticipating the arrival of a vaccine for COVID-19, which is the hope here. Having a safe and effective vaccine is also the top priority for vaccines in general and for what we're looking in public health to be able to provide. Details are still being determined, and here is what we currently know, or what I currently know about the COVID-19 vaccines. Obviously, we know several vaccines are in development. What I can say for certain is 2 will be undergoing FDA review in the next 2 weeks. In fact, the Pfizer vaccine is supposed to be reviewed on December 10th, which I believe is Thursday, and then the following Thursday is the Moderna vaccine. So it is actually possible that vaccines could be ready in December for some groups. This will, of course, depend on what is learned from these studies and the FDA rulings. Even though you'll have heard that production has been going on, and I'll show you a graphic eventually, if they say it's not safe or effective, those vaccines will not be made available. Currently, a vaccine remains only one of the ways, and this is an important thing, one of the ways to stop the spread of the disease. Remember, especially with the supply of vaccine being limited at first, continuing to do the other things to help stop the spread will be just as important as it is now, which means, once again, wearing a face covering, staying at least 6 feet away from others, washing your hands a lot, and staying home if you're sick. So moving on to the topic of why we need a vaccine, just to remind everyone, getting vaccinated against COVID-19, we believe, if it's effective and safe, will be one of the best ways to protect yourself and everyone around you. If you're protected from getting COVID-19, you're less likely to pass the disease to others, or the germ. The more people who get vaccinated against COVID-19, the better it is for everyone. More people vaccinated with a safe and effective vaccine means that there will be less germ spread and disease in our region. That is the hope. So getting vaccinated is one of the most important steps to protect yourself and your community. And by stopping the spread of COVID-19 with vaccine, it gets us closer to the end of the pandemic when it's effective, so we can have our businesses and schools and other venues, our society, open as usual without COVID fear. So people often hear about vaccination and herd immunity, so I thought I would take a few minutes to talk about that. Vaccination is necessary if the goal is for herd immunity. And herd immunity is our way of saying when most people in a population or group are immune to a disease. Being immune means they cannot get the disease because they either got a vaccine or they already had the disease and can't get it again, at least for a while. When a lot of people cannot get the disease, it helps to protect other people in the population who are not immune, and that means they could still get the disease. Herd immunity may stop or slow the spread. What we have to know is we don't know enough about COVID-19 to be sure that herd immunity is possible. This is a new disease, so obviously we've had essentially about a year's time with the disease. So obviously there's no way we can buy that time in advance. So some of the things we don't know, which affects this, is how long a person cannot get sick again after they already were sick with COVID-19. Said a different way, how long are they immune? If being infected before will make the next infection better or worse. If a person who was sick before and then has contact with COVID-19 again, will they be able to pass the virus to others? However, the reason why we focus on herd immunity is we don't recommend letting herd immunity happen naturally, because this can come at the cost of others possibly getting very sick and dying. Vaccination in the past has been a way to reach herd immunity without people getting sick and or dying. So that is the goal of vaccination. And it really lets a person's body develop the protection against a disease without having to actually get as sick with the disease as you can if you are exposed to the virus. So, moving on to vaccine safety and efficacy. Let me if we move on to the next slide. I'm sorry for you all having to look at it at that level of detail. It's tiny, but what I wanted to be able to show to people is there is a usual process for the vaccine development process, and that's where it says the pre-COVID vaccine development process, and the sources for this information are CDC and FDA. And there are essentially 7 steps. There's a preclinical or laboratory animal research. Phase 2 is smaller safety studies with human beings, then larger trials with human beings or clinical trials. And the largest would be with thousands of folks being getting the vaccine, determining how effective. It would normally go through a licensure process and then monitoring for the production before vaccination begins. And then after vaccination, there would be continued, this has always been the case while I've been practicing, that there is a ongoing post-vaccination safety monitoring to detect what may not have been able to be detected with even the large studies at those points. The COVID vaccine development process is essentially the same that FDA has put out, with a few modifications because of the pandemic. All of the steps are there. The first 4 dealing with the preclinical and the phase 1 through 3 are the same. The approval process is using an emergency use authorization because the recognition is that there's an emergency afoot. You'll see that the production was actually authorized at the same time. Now, what that means, none of that vaccine has actually been released, okay? That is what's being waited for by the FDA process for the 2 subsequent Thursdays. They were simultaneously permitted to make it. That is what the federal government was actually purchasing, was like the ability to have it ready should it be seen effective and safe. If those things are true, then there's no delay in that sequential need for production, because then it leads to further delay. So if it's not approved, those vaccines will not come out. And that's the end of the story as we understand it today. Obviously, this is why we want to hear everything. And then when vaccination begins, the same processes at a minimum will be in place to monitor to see if these things are the case. What I'm looking for, and sometimes people ask, what am I looking for, and my colleagues, we're looking to see how much have these processes been similar, pre-COVID, post-COVID. I don't do assessments based on press releases. I'm just going to use this as an example. If the press releases are borne out by what the FDA reviews are, for example, when you compare the number of people in phase 1, 2, and 3 for the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, they're on the same par of the number of people that FDA typically recommends for other vaccines. So those who have had the shingles vaccine that was done pre-COVID, those are things that they're aware of. They have similar numbers of people that were tested. So that is why we're looking for the processes to be roughly the same, to be able to make the conclusions about safety and effectiveness. And so that's the general gist of this is, and I can go into more detail as questions come up, but I wanted to first make sure that was said, and then I want to go into, before taking questions, going into a few more things, including what we know about what's going to happen in Virginia.